In this episode of the Flowerlounge Podcast, I talk about using this time of intensity to more swiftly unravel patterns. And I also tell a really cool story about a tropical flower that appeared out of nowhere and bloomed at our front door here in the desert, and the name and why it's so auspicious and meaningful right now. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. So this is the first week of April, and I wanted to do a quick recording. I heard from many of you from some of the solo podcasts that I did the last week and the week prior that it was really helpful, and so I'm just going to record a short one today to share whatever is happening right now, and hopefully that continues to be of benefit to you all. I wanted to say that I'm not sure if it's based on what's happening in the world and if everyone might be feeling this way, or if it's due to the fact of very specific flower essences that I've been taking, both the new one, Expansive Presence, and Moonstone, that I'm finding that in the last week or two, it's so much easier for me to discern when I have a disproportionate response to something, to what's actually happening in reality. So I think I have to give you a concrete example. So yesterday, I had this moment where I felt like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be doing 50 things at once. We've been really busy here in Phoenix. We're at a couple days ago, we finally went to our stay-at-home status here in Phoenix, and we are falling under, based on what LOTUSWEI does and some of our other tenants in the building, what they do, we're falling under essential businesses in Phoenix. So we're running and rolling as usual, business as usual. And so we've been really busy, actually. And yesterday I needed to go out to the desert for some photographs. And so I knew I had a certain amount of time at the office and I needed to get a bunch of things done. And then I noticed that I was really starting to feel super overwhelmed, majorly overwhelmed, oh my God, I've got to get these 50 things done. And so I noticed that I was having that feeling. And then I realized, oh, okay, why am I so overwhelmed? I always have a million things on my to-do list, and some of these don't actually 100% need to be done today, but I feel like they do, and some could wait, and there's always things that can wait. But I was feeling super compressed. And then I realized that some of the things on my to-do list were about picking up some things that I wanted to get for my dog, one of my dogs. And this one of my dogs, even though she is quite young, maybe 8 or 9 years old, we discovered that she had a heart murmur some time ago, maybe a year or so ago, and have been noticing changes in how she just changes in her behavior and her breathing patterns. And, if dogs don't have heartworms, there isn't a lot you can do for heart murmurs. And so what usually happens is they will have a heart attack or their lungs will fill up with fluid. Those are the two ways that they'll typically go if it's a heart-related issue. And so the sense of oh my gosh, she could go at any moment. Okay. And then I've got to pick up this, will be supportive for her, and I got to pick up this, right? I need to find some beef heart because the original sources that I used to buy it for Joy don't have it, and I need to go find where they have it. And anyway, I realized that those couple things on my to-do list, along with everything else, were giving me a disproportionate amount of feedback in my system in terms of rather than just saying or feeling, I have 10 things that I must get done within the next hour, for example, there's this subconscious, I have 10 things to do, but 2 of the things could save someone's life. And so suddenly all of those 10 things have this magnitude of the potential to save my dog's life. So when I realized that this intensity of overwhelm that I was experiencing was based on, essentially, if you boil it all down to the subconscious patterning, was like, I have to get this stuff done to save my dog's life, right? By this hour today, right? And actually, I kind of chuckled to myself, and it was like, well, do I actually think I can make that much of an impact? I mean, yes, we should always do as many good things as possible that we can do in our lives, and we do make an impact. But I can't determine when a creature or a being decides to die or not. That's totally out of my control. That is not up to me. And then I realized, oh, we just started giving her some new food, and there's beef heart in the food, and it's all going to be okay. Then I could kind of ease up on my, needing to go do errands before something else I needed to do. Okay, so that's what I mean by being able to identify much quicker. So like, rather than letting it sort of run you, being able to identify much more quickly, like when am I having an emotional response that is disproportionate to what's actually happening in reality? And whether it's the flower essences or whether it's this world phenomenon that everyone is experiencing the same, I think it's interesting when we can get to a point where we can more quickly discern when we're engaging in a pattern that's making our emotional response disproportionate. Because then we can kind of stop, we can take a break, we can take care of ourselves and tend to whatever is the worry piece, right? So in my case, it's like, well, I'm afraid of my dog dying. Of course anyone would understand, right? Like if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, of course, right? Of course, anyone who is worried about their dog dying, or anyone who is near and dear to them, any loved one dying, of course is going to be experiencing stress. Of course. So we can have compassion for those worrying parts of ourselves, and then we can, just by identifying it, sort of takes the intensity out of the situation, so we can find a new way of operating without letting that take charge. So I find that in the last week or so, it is much easier and much more expediently available when that is happening. I had another instance, which, thinking about it, I find kind of humorous now, but a really dear friend of mine who comes to the building every day after work, he sent me a text and said that, just like keeping me up to date on what's happening with the governor and the state in terms of business. And he was saying, you should have the people who work for you prepared and ready in case the police approach them about why they're working. And he was at the office, and I was worried that he was going to that he was going to send that message instead of me. And I wanted to be able to control the tone behind the message, that I wasn't afraid, that we have police that hang out right next to our building every day, and they always see us. And I really didn't believe that we were not in martial law. So we'll put it that way. And we're doing everything legally by law that we need to be doing, and we're not doing anything wrong. So I wanted to make sure everything was transmitted with that tone and not this sort of dramatic, fear-based tone right to my team. And so when I realized that message might be being conveyed and I wasn't at the office, I was so angry. And I was interesting because I became so angry that I was like, literally my hands were shaking. And I stopped and I thought, wow, that is so interesting, like such an interesting response. And in that moment, I thought, I'm having one of those moments, right, where the emotional response is disproportionate to what's just actually happening in reality. He's wanting to give me a heads up. He's wanting to give people a heads up. And so I share those experiences because you may be having similar experiences, and it is so liberating in that moment when you can notice, okay, I'm having a response that's disproportionate to what's actually happening in reality, and B, you can actually have a sense of humor about it, and there's more spaciousness and more patience and compassion and understanding for yourself and also anyone else that's involved. And then the situation arose again when another little shift happened in the way that our state was operating. And the second time it was like super easy. And then I realized, this friend of mine is having to bear the brunt of all the hazmat stuff at his job. And of course, he's much more stressed out about it than we are at LOTUSWEI. And so I could have compassion for his experience. And anyway, long story short, you might reflect on the things that in the last few weeks have sort of tripped you up, like tripped your triggers. And it's just such an opportunity, like this intensity. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but like the intensity of this situation of whatever is going on that nobody really has all the answers for, because it's so complex. The intensity is allowing us to have more ability to see what are those odd little things that trip us up. And with many of us having a shifted schedule, I'm obviously not staying at home like many of you are. But even though so many people are staying home, I feel that, and I feel the difference. And so, we're all part of the same collective. And so I do feel different, even though I'm still working every day. And so I'll just come back to something that I think I keep coming back to, but it's always good to remind ourselves, is to keep making time to check in with ourselves. And when you notice yourself going off the rails a bit or having an emotional response to something, it's such a great opportunity that more and more we can see this as like an opportunity, because if we can liberate some of the stuck energy around whatever those things are, it will liberate not only going backwards, but going forwards. And whenever similar situations arise in the future, we'll be even freer of that situation. That experiencing an intensity of emotion is a good thing. It releases something. It releases energy. It releases stuckness from places that we may not have had access to in our normal operating routine lives, where we felt like nothing was going to change and nothing was in danger and everything was secure. And same old, same old, same old. And in that life, there is just as much fragility. There is just as much impermanence. So say like 2 months ago, there is just as much fragility. Like I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and that story is the same 2 months ago as it is now. But because of the heightened intensity around the situation that we're in now, it has allowed some of those illusory senses of structure and stability to dissolve, so that we can more expediently look at whatever arises and experience it with a little more intensity, which boils down to this time is so powerful for doing personal work and for doing the introspective, I got really bent out of shape about that. I wonder what that's about. And to doing the self-inquiry and to sitting with ourselves and being compassionate about our responses and understanding our inner workings and understanding what things set us off, knowing that those things are in a constant state of flux and change. That because, I'll use my kind of little silly examples, because of the way I responded about like being angry about someone controlling the message in an environment that I consider really sacred and precious and safe, the potentiality of someone disturbing the peace or disturbing the energy made me really angry and protective. Okay, so there was a lot of anger that surged to the surface, and in that intensity, something that was stuck got released. And so when this situation circled around for the second time, it was as if nothing, like I didn't experience, nothing, like I didn't have any sort of emotional response at all. And in fact, I could have that much more compassion for the person who was the bearer of this message and really understand where he was coming from and offer him some humor. he's got to be the one to take everybody's temperatures at the shop. And I said, you just got to tell your boss that you're only going to do that if they give you a dinosaur suit. So just like trying to keep a little sense of humor about it. So my point being is we can actually rejoice in this intensity, even if it's not easy. We can be really happy about it because it's a tremendous opportunity to purify and liberate things a little more expediently than we would in normal life, where we are more lulled by this sense of routine and that everything's just kind of trucking along, and this false sense of stability in a sense. And so now that we are more in touch with this real sense of things are always changing and shifting and wildly unknown about our lives. That's the way it always is and always had been, but we might not have experienced. That might not have been our experience. We might have felt like everything's under control, everything's staying the same in a subtle way, right? Maybe not a conscious way, but we just kind of felt like the framework and the fabric of everything was really settled. And because things are so unsettled for so many people right now, and we are all a part of this collective consciousness, it offers up this more realistic window into this wild unknown that, in fact, we are a part of every day. And we can use the intensity of whatever arises to liberate things more quickly than if everything was just hunky-dory. So I hope I'm making sense. Certainly you can send any questions through email or social, and I can address them, of course, through another podcast or by response. But really want to encourage you all to see this as an opportunity to really take moments to check in with yourself. And especially when you experience times of feeling bent out of shape, no matter what that is, whether it's grief, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's joy, whether it's bliss, whether it's a sense of possibility, whether it's financial scarcity, whether it's abundance, whether it's discovering that all along what was most important and the things that were the most meaningful, maybe you weren't as in touch with when things were just trucking along. Whatever your experience may be right now, see it all as an opportunity and make sure that you extra give yourself the chance and opportunity to check in with yourself, to take little mini breaks and address whatever is arising within you, because it is a tremendous opportunity. Never tell yourself like, oh, I need to not feel this, or I need to let go of this, or I need to not feel this way, or I need to be more clear, or like those kinds of dismissal can actually create obstacles and make something more stuck in our systems. And so just as a reminder, I am also doing the same with my own practice, is to really address head on and give yourself some tending, turn toward whatever it is that arises, good, bad, ugly, whatever that is, and really pay attention. Try not to be lulled by the distraction of excessive social media or trying to figure things out, or, a little here and there, of course, is natural. But really to give yourself the opportunity to be with yourself and whatever arises, and to rely on yourself as the greatest source of wisdom, as the greatest source of insight, as the greatest source of clarity. You have chosen this life, and you are 500% equipped to deal with whatever arises in your life, with whatever arises in your mind stream, with whatever arises in your emotional, mental landscape, whatever arises around you externally, what arises internally, that you are 500% equipped, and you are the perfect person to unravel and untie the knots in your particular flavor of energetic system patterning. You hold the key. Okay, so there are two more things that I want to share with you that are really important. One, I want to tell you this really, really cool story And second, let you know that if you haven't heard yet, that we released a new blend of flower essences. Kind of a big deal for us. We, originally started out with the first 6, kind of like our 1.0 version. And then we released, over the last 2 years, we released our second set of 6, which is like our 2.0. And this is the first blend of the sort of 3.0. And we really see them as the first 6 blends are sort of like survival, right? It's like the things we need right away, like love, sleep, happiness, peace, calm me down, energy, inspiration, get things done. The second set of 6 blends is taking it a little deeper. Okay, now that we're surviving and we're stable, we're going to look at old traumas or childhood issues or the love skeletons in the closet we didn't want to look at, or try to speak our truth more, and so on. And this third set of 6, there will be 6 blends in this 3.0, takes it a level even deeper. So we're really excited about this first blend of this third set. It's called Expansive Presence. And you can see the visual images of the flowers online. All the photos are up. And it's really about expansion into your greatest expression, dissolving scarcity mentality, this dissolving fear of there not being enough, of this sort of lack of abundance. And it comes at such a perfect time. It's also for really being able to step into a greater leadership and embody your gifts to the fullest extent. It's about nourishing yourself. It's for those times when we say, no, I got it, I can do it myself. And instead of that pattern shifting into accepting and receiving support, receiving abundantly, allowing people to nourish our vision, and knowing that the more we can be and the more we can express, the more others can be and the more others can express. So I've been working with it pretty intensively over the last 2 weeks, and wow, it is such a difference. I feel like there's this element of anything that is in my life that is draining me on a subtle level, people, projects, things, it becomes very, very apparent, and it's very easy to release. And I don't mean release in the sense of like letting go. Like literally, I had this handyman guy helping me with a project, and I just kind of got him to the finish point, and instead of hiring him for other real estate projects, I just said, okay, we're done. And it's very easy to tell the truth, ironically, even though this isn't marketed as like a truth-telling blend. It just makes things so much easier and more effortless. I feel this sense of Mother Earth, like spaciousness, like an unbelievable spaciousness and sense of ease. So that's my personal experience, and I'm sure more will come out, and I'm seeing different members of my team sort of like bloom overnight. I'm not sure if they're even aware of it. It's really sweet. And so anyway, that is our newest blend that we're really excited about. But I wanted to tell you this really cool story, and this is what I'm the most excited about today, is that sometime last year, so out in the front of our building, the Self-Arising Nature Center, right? So in the front of the building, it's just like this big kind of massive white concrete building. It's got such strength to it. There's this wall that has these bushes on it. And there's a sign where the previous owner used to have their, letters of Arizona Medical Association, because that was who the building belonged to. And right around the time that we were taking the letters down and putting up our own letters, the bush right in front of the sign died really oddly. It was very strange. Like all the rest of the bushes were fine. It seemed to be getting enough water. We couldn't really figure it out, and it just died. So we ended up cutting it. And around that same time, this weed sprouted up in that same area. And the landscaper said, should I cut this? I said, no, leave it. I love weeds. And when things just kind of sprout up miraculously, it's always really interesting to see what it is. And I thought the leaves looked a little bit like milkweed. So I thought, well, if this is a milkweed, it'd be a great stopping point for the butterflies. So we left it and we left it and we left it and we left it. That was last year, and was just kind of been kind of on this like funky growth trajectory. And we forgot about it until the other day. I got a message from Taylor and she said, oh my God, this plant is blooming. She was walking around the property, and wouldn't you know it, in the last couple of weeks, it just popped into full bloom. And it is the most incredible flower. It's like magenta with indigo, and they look like bundles of stars. And Taylor did some research on the flower and found that it was actually a tropical milkweed that often grows in Hawaii and Thailand and India. The heck is it doing in Arizona? It's dry desert here. I don't know how this plant found its way. I don't know how it found its way to this particular location, this moment in time. This bush had to die. This random weed had to sprout up. And when you look at the title of our building, Self-Arising Nature Center, it's right under nature. So you see right under nature this like wild, weedy thing growing, which is so beautiful and miraculous, right? And it gets better. Stay with me here. So right now we're under all this like weird lockdown stuff, right? And people are in this kind of state of unknown and weirdness and not knowing, the number. So the name of this flower is the crown flower. I mean, there are several names, right? There are several common names. It's also called Indian milkweed. But one of the main names that you see of this flower is the crown flower. And if you speak Spanish, you will understand that the crown is corona. So how weird and interesting and auspicious is it that this flower showed up right at our front doorstep underneath the word nature? There's so much more to it, but we'll just leave it at that. I think it's very fascinating. I'm always a firm believer of, if there is a rando flower that blooms up wildly in your backyard, it is for a reason. It is for you. It is a gift. And it most likely possesses qualities that you will want to explore to greater depth and detail. And it just means that Mother Nature is so looking out for us all the time and so supportive and has our back in every moment. And so I did some research. I did collect the flower essence, and I thought you guys would want to know. I have some notes here, and we will work as fast as possible to get this out there to be available, because it seems very appropriate. The greatest aspect of this flower is that it helps us look at our worst nightmare with equanimity. So what that means is being able to face our worst fears with a sense of neutrality and calm and spaciousness. It dissolves paranoia, anxiety, frantic worry, fear, disgust, not wanting to see what's ugly, fear of something overwhelming us or emotions just totally overtaking us. It's gently cleansing, like the deepest bowels of your being, like what are those types of fears? It helps us be more poised, be in a state of equipoise, equanimity, neutrality, freedom from duality, right? This like, is it this way? Is it that way? Is it right, wrong, evil, good? Who's the good guys? Who's the bad guys? It helps us experience a new way, a new kind of calm freedom. It helps us be more expressive and to really just embody like, this is me, not in like a look at me way, but just like a very simple, non-assuming, this is me. And it also helps us have a more clear introduction to our own true self-arising nature. And so I'm really excited for this elixir to come out. I'm really excited to take it. I think this will be one of the first times that we just collect and release immediately. So that will be available as soon as we can get it out there, I imagine within a couple of weeks, if any of you are interested. It's such a beautiful flower, and we'll have information up online soon. We have some photos on Instagram. Just had to share that story. Was really excited about it. The coincidental nature of it was so interesting. So thank you again so much for sticking with me and listening to the Flowerlounge podcast. We have so many good episodes coming up, so many in the hopper. We sort of put a little pause in our regular programming so we could really meet our community where we are right now. But we have so much good stuff coming up. So thanks for sticking with us, and thanks for listening to the Flower Lounge. Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.